Welcome to this extended preview of Together in Perfect Felicity, written by P.O. Dixon and read by Anna, a professional human voice replica. Enjoy stories with rivals vying for the hero's affection? This story is filled with twists and turns you won't want to miss. Happy listening. Chapter 1. In Want of Diversion. It is a truth universally acknowledged that the topic of discussion among four unmarried young ladies who are gathered together in the same room and in want of diversion must invariably centre on the prospects for marital felicity for each of them in their turn. Such was indeed the case in Miss Elizabeth Bennet's bedroom at Longbourn Manor that day. I contend that happiness in marriage is entirely a matter of chance, declared Charlotte Lucas, who was visiting from the neighbouring village. Spoken by the least likely of the four of us to reach the altar. Elizabeth, the second eldest of 5 Bennet daughters, stared at her cousin in utter dismay on behalf of her intimate friend, Charlotte. Elizabeth's junior by 2 years, Phoebe Phillips, paid her no notice. Not that Elizabeth expected any real sort of regret on the young lady's part. If ever one might be described as her mother's daughter, unquestionably, it was Phoebe. Though closest in age to Elizabeth's younger sister Mary, and closest in terms of sensibility to Elizabeth's 2 youngest sisters, Kitty and Lydia, Phoebe much preferred the company of the 2 eldest Bennet sisters, Jane and Elizabeth. What with Phoebe being the only daughter of Mrs. Agatha Phillips, and Mrs. Phillips being the only sister of Mrs. Fanny Bennet, it was generally expected that the cousins would be the dearest of friends, even if the girls' temperaments were as varying as day and night. To her credit, Phoebe was not quite so vulgar as her mother was thought to be. Elizabeth rather supposed it was merely a matter of time. Whereas the embarrassment of it all caused the eldest Bennet daughter's angelic face to redden, the younger daughter's astonishment was not so easily repressed.
"Phoebe!"
Elizabeth exclaimed with energy.
"What did I say that is not true?"
"It is not what you said so much as it is the manner in which you said it. You owe Charlotte an apology," Elizabeth declared. A very plain-looking, intelligent woman, and the oldest in the group by at least 4 years, Charlotte said, "Dearest Eliza, you need not censure your cousin on my behalf." Phoebe smirked. "There, you see, Lizzie," the young lady cried. "Charlotte knows the truth when she hears it. She is not at all offended." "Heaven forbid," replied Charlotte. "Were I to be affronted by any of the things you say, Phoebe, I might be as miserable as you are." Pleased by her friend's retort, even at her own relations' expense, Elizabeth covered her mouth to mask her smile. She loved nothing more than laughing at the ridiculousness of others, a trait she inherited from her dear father, Mr. Thomas Bennet. Jane's disposition demanded a more amicable resolution to the ebbing tension among their little group. "I believe no one is ever really too old to find happiness in marriage," said she. "Says the second least likely person among us to find a husband."
"Phoebe!"
Elizabeth exclaimed once more. "Although I will allow that Jane is the only one of us who has ever come close to securing a marriage proposal. How many times have we heard my Aunt Bennet boast of the young man at my Uncle Gardner's home in town who was so much in love with her and the general belief that he would have made her an offer even though he did not." "Lest you forget, Phoebe, Jane was only 15 at the time. I recall Mrs. Bennet saying that likely was the reason," Charlotte said. "Oh, but he wrote such pretty verses on her," Phoebe waxed poetically. "Pray, whatever became of your young beau, Cousin Jane?" Elizabeth said, "Who really gives a care? Poetry or no poetry, the man is no doubt a fool." Charlotte scoffed. "I wager all men are fools. How else might one explain the abundance of single young ladies in want of husbands among our general acquaintances?" "Owe it to our rather exacting standards," Elizabeth promptly asserted. That and the limited variety of single young men in this part of the country. Exacting? Pray, what exactly is your opinion on the ideal husband, Lizzie? Phoebe asked. I should like to think the ideal husband is respectable and kind, and one who honours his wife and protects his family. And handsome! Her spirits rising to playfulness, Elizabeth said, I see no reason why the ideal husband should not be handsome. I posit one might just as easily fall in love with a handsome man as one who is rather less pleasing to the eye. Handsome men deserve love too. Oh, Lizzie, Jane said, in response to her sister's jest. It is not as though you need ever concern yourself in that regard, Jane. You are far too beautiful to catch the eye of any man whose beauty does not equal yours. How a gentleman looks on the outside can mean nothing at all if he does not possess goodness within, Jane said.
I could not agree more,
Charlotte began, and as we all know how much Eliza enjoys professing opinions that are not always her own, she surely does not measure a man by his physical attributes either. Indeed, Elizabeth said, reaching out to take her friend by the hand and giving it a gentle squeeze in solidarity. You know me very well. Releasing her friend's hand, she continued, but that is enough about me. What characteristics do you look for in a potential husband, dearest Charlotte? Charlotte shrugged. I always like to think of myself as being a very sensible woman. At 27, I have long given up the idea of meeting my very own charming prince. So long as I can marry a decent man and be the mistress of my own home, however large or small, I should have no cause to repine. La! Exclaimed Phoebe. Decent, respectable, handsome. If neither of you is willing to say what is the most important characteristic of the ideal husband, then I surely will. What else is there? Jane asked. Why, the gentleman must be rich, of course. Surely you have heard it said that money does not buy happiness, Phoebe, Elizabeth said. I have heard it said time and time again, and I simply do not believe it. And on the off chance it is true, what does it signify, especially since one might just as easily fall in love with a rich man as a poor one? Says the youngest of the four of us, Elizabeth responded. If by that you mean to say I am merely young and foolish, perhaps I am. But I shall not be deterred from my opinion. Besides, as Charlotte said, happiness in marriage is purely a matter of chance. I prefer to take my chances with a rich man. I wish you nothing but the best of luck, Elizabeth said. Laugh at me if you dare, Cousin Lizzie, but I seriously doubt there is one among us who would refuse the hand of a wealthy gentleman, regardless of his character. Elizabeth did not mean to be cruel, but she could not help but laugh a little. She threw a quick glance to her right, and then another to her left. In spite of your strong resolve, your assertion is one that will no doubt go unproven. It is not as though there is an abundance of wealthy young men in want of wives in our midst. Phoebe clutched a soft pillow to her bosom. Surely you are aware that particular dilemma is soon to be resolved. Are you speaking of the imminent arrival of Mr. Charles Bingley, the young man who recently let Netherfield Park? Jane inquired. Indeed, I am. To be more precise, the young man of large fortune from the north of England. He is said to have £5,000 a year, and he is also said to be handsome, which must surely count for something with you, Lizzie. But wait until you hear the best part of it all. Mr. Bingley will be accompanied by a rather large party when he returns. He is single, after all, and where there is one single man, there is bound to be another, and another, and another. What can the size of Mr. Bingley's party have to do with any of us? Cried Jane. The greater the number of single men in his party, the better are our chances of meeting our potential husbands among them, Phoebe cried. She tilted her head in a moment of contemplation, and then continued, "Oh, I have a brilliant idea. What say you, ladies, that we make a pact that the four of us will do everything in our power to find husbands during the course of the next 12 months? Even if what you propose were viable, marriage is a serious commitment. I do not know that I would be comfortable approaching such a consequential endeavour in such a frivolous, dare I say tactless, manner as you are suggesting. For heaven's sake, Lizzie, it is not as though I have suggested a wager or anything of the sort. I am merely suggesting that we seize control of our own destinies. If not now, then when? None of us is getting any younger, and who is to say? One of us might very well succeed. Think about it, Charlotte, Jane, Lizzie. What is there for any of us to lose?" Chapter 2. In Due Time. London, England, Darcy House, 1811. "Brother, may I be allowed to travel with you to Hertfordshire? I promise you will scarcely be aware of my presence." Fitzwilliam Darcy laid his newspaper aside, thus giving his younger sister his full attention.
Georgiana, you know how much it pains me to cause you displeasure, but in this case I fear I have no other choice.
"What would be the harm in my joining you and the Bingleys? Are you concerned about my age? Do you still consider me too young to be out in society?"
You are far too young to be out in society. However, that fact has nothing to do with my belief that now is not the time for you to travel to Hertfordshire.
"You are unfair, brother."
Georgiana, you have never expressed an interest in travelling with me before. What is the reason for your sudden change of heart?
"Well, as you may or may not know, Miss Bingley and I have grown rather fond of each other of late, and she thinks this trip would provide the perfect excuse for me to get better acquainted with her brother." Darcy drew a quick breath.
Does she now?
"You need not pretend the thought of an alliance between me and your friend Mr. Bingley has not crossed your mind. Do you deny it?" Frankly, Darcy had no wish to deny it. Neither did he wish to confirm it. His young sister was only 6 and 10, far too young to entertain thoughts of marriage. He held firmly to that view, despite having interceded on her behalf some time earlier to prevent her from eloping with the one man in the world whom Darcy thought of as his worst enemy, George Wickham. He knew how much the discovery that Wickham's primary motive in the scheme was her dowry of £30,000 had pained his young sister. He even feared that suffering a broken heart, owing to her disappointed hopes at such a tender age, might colour her views on marriage. What a shock it was to learn that she had put that part of her past behind so soon, and subsequently transferred her girlish hopes and dreams to his friend Charles Bingley.
I will only say that Miss Bingley ought not to place the burden of an alliance between our families, which she so desperately covets, on your shoulders. You are far too young to find yourself in such a position.
Marriage at 16 is certainly not out of the question. Indeed, it happens all the time.
Perhaps for young ladies who are far beneath you in consequence. So long as it is within my power to prevent it, no sister of mine shall suffer such a weighty burden. There will be time enough for all that after you have enjoyed a season or two.
By my calculation, that might be 2 or 3 years hence, at most. By then, I may have lost my chance to garner Mr. Bingley's affections. Miss Bingley often says her brother is of an age where he is always making new acquaintances everywhere he goes. Desperate young ladies and their eager mammas, who are constantly in search of single young men with large fortunes, whom they naturally suspect are in want of wives, abound. He arched his brow.
If engaging in such intercourse defines the nature of your association, I think you and your new friend, Miss Bingley, are spending far too much time in each other's company. It is all the more reason why I do not believe it is a good idea for you to accompany us to Hertfordshire."
"And this is your real opinion? This is your final word?"
"It is."
"Very well, but mind you, I like Mr. Bingley, and I suspect he likes me too. I will not be dissuaded in my quest to become Mrs. Charles Bingley some day."
"So long as some day is several years in the making, I shall have no cause to repine."
"It is good to know that I have your blessing." With that, Georgiana stood in preparation to quit the room. "Good day, brother."
"Where are you going?"
"I think I should like to call on Miss Bingley this morning. Who is to say how long she and I will be separated, what with your upcoming departure for Hertfordshire? Perchance I shall see her brother as well. I shall be happy to convey any message to him that you might wish."
"You will remember to ask Mrs. Annesley to join you, I trust, and you will remain in her company at all times."
Mrs. Annesley had been employed by Darcy to be his sister's companion in the aftermath of the discovery that her former companion, a Mrs. Young, had been complicit in the Wickham debacle at Ramsgate. In subjecting Mrs. Annesley to a thorough investigation before hiring her, Darcy intended never to make such a mistake again. His sister meant everything to him. "Indeed, I would never dream of doing otherwise." The young lady was gone directly, leaving her brother alone with his thoughts. Still a bit taken aback by the candid discussion with a sister more than a decade his junior, Darcy sat at his desk, barely attending to the mounds of paperwork he needed to get through in preparation for his upcoming trip.
"I have no one to blame other than myself for Georgiana's belief that an alliance between Bingley and her would meet with my approval."
Indeed, Miss Bingley had given the strongest hints of how favourable such an alliance might prove to be. As it was, on the heels of Georgiana's thwarted elopement scheme with George Wickham, his former friend and current nemesis, Darcy had said nothing to dampen the young lady's enthusiasm. At the time, he was more concerned about how London society might react should his young sister's actions be discovered.
Her reputation would have been ruined.
Surely she did not deserve such a dire fate merely for trusting someone whom she had known all her life and, as a consequence, formed a strong attachment which she mistook for love. Even now, the notion of a possible alliance between his sister and one of his closest friends comforted Darcy.
What better two people for each other?
He liked to think.
All in due time, however. All in due time.
Chapter 3. Her next recollection. The lady of the manor house threw open the door of her older daughter's room and poked her head inside. "You girls must hurry, or we shall arrive at the assembly after all the best gentlemen in the Netherfield party are taken. I can assure you my sister Phillips and her daughter will not be late. Even though Phoebe is not so pretty as you, Jane, and she is not so lively as Lydia, she is pretty enough, and she is certainly lively enough, and I cannot bear the thought of her outshining either of my girls." A woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper when Mrs. Bennet was discontented, she fancied herself nervous. The business of her life was to get her daughters married. How unfair it was to her to have been saddled with 5 girls when her sister had been burdened with only 1. Her sole consolation was her belief that being the prettier of the 2 Gardiner girls had garnered her such a fate. Marrying off one daughter was nothing at all in comparison with her own onerous job. Mrs. Bennet would not sit idly by and watch her niece secure a husband before one of her own girls reached the altar. "We shall come down directly, mamma," Elizabeth called out to her mother, who was by then on her way to her younger daughter's room to hurry them along as well. Elizabeth paused for a moment and admired her sister Jane's reflection in the mirror. How lovely you are, dearest Jane. I dare say neither Phoebe or Charlotte nor I stand a chance of garnering the attention of a single gentleman in attendance at the Meryton Assembly this evening." Jane smiled. "Pray, Lizzie, you are not giving any serious thought to taking part in our cousin's challenge." "Perhaps not at first, but having caught a glimpse of our new neighbour, I can think of far less diverting ways to pass this evening." At Mrs. Bennet's adamant insistence, Mr. Bennet had been among the first in their neighbourhood to call on Mr. Bingley to welcome the young man to his new home. Bingley subsequently had returned Mr. Bennet's kindness by calling on him at Longbourn. His visit met with Mrs. Bennet's utter delight, for she contended the young man had entertained hopes of being admitted to a sight of her daughters, whose beauty was so renowned in that part of the country. He surely had heard as much. Alas, he saw only the father. The ladies were somewhat more fortunate, for they had the advantage of ascertaining from an upper window that he was a handsome young man who wore a blue coat and rode a black horse. "You sound just like Phoebe," Jane said. "Now, Jane, surely you cannot deny that the prospect of meeting Mr. Bingley does not intrigue you." "I am certain he is very agreeable, and I certainly welcome the chance to meet new people." "As it is all but confirmed that upon his most recent return from town he brought 12 ladies and 7 gentlemen with him, you shall have plenty of opportunities." Jane tilted her head ever so slightly. "The last I heard, his party consisted of only 6 people from London, his 5 sisters and a cousin." "Then let us pray his cousin is also a single young man in want of a wife," said Elizabeth, as she went to the bed and retrieved a lovely shawl. "And lest I forget, a handsome one at that. Handsome and exceedingly wealthy." "Oh, Lizzie, you are incorrigible." The women of Longbourn arrived at the assembly room just in time to command an advantageous view for the entrance of the Netherfield party. What a stunning entry indeed! So much so that any disappointment over the actual size of the party, which consisted of Mr. Bingley, his 2 sisters, the husband of the eldest, and another young man, was of little consequence. Mr. Bingley was good-looking and gentlemanlike. He had a pleasant countenance and easy, unaffected manners. His sisters were fine women with an air of decided fashion. His brother-in-law, Mr. Hurst, merely looked the gentleman, but his friend Mr. Darcy soon drew the attention of the room by his fine, tall person, handsome features, and noble mien. What a fine figure of a man! "I declare he is much more handsome than Mr. Bingley," cried Phoebe, who was standing next to her cousins and their friend Charlotte. Speaking in a more hushed voice, the latter said, "He is also said to have 10,000 a year." £10,000 a year!" Phoebe exclaimed with energy. Charlotte nodded. "And very likely more. He hails from Derbyshire and is said to own half the county." "How do you know all of this, dearest Charlotte?" Elizabeth inquired. "Why, my father called on Mr. Bingley this morning." 10,000 a year and half the county," Phoebe repeated with excitement. "Ladies, I think I have found my future husband." Elizabeth laughed a little at her cousin's conjecture. "Did you hear that, Jane? Our cousin has set her cap on Mr. Bingley's friend, which means Mr. Bingley is quite safe for you." "And what about you, Cousin Lizzie? Have you no interest in claiming Mr. Bingley for yourself?" After a moment she gasped, "Surely you do not mean to pursue my Mr. Darcy?" Before Elizabeth could fashion a fitting reply, Mrs. Bennet grabbed both her daughters by the hand and proceeded to coax them to the part of the room where the members of the Netherfield party were standing. Charlotte and Phoebe followed suit. The introductions were made by Charlotte's father, Sir William Lucas, a friendly, accommodating man whose elevated rank obliged him to attend to such tasks. As a consequence of having to wait for her turn, Elizabeth was able to judge the newcomers with some degree of impunity. Mr. Bingley was even more handsome from this vantage point. His sisters were fine-looking women as well. Elizabeth could tell right away that the two ladies thought rather highly of themselves. Their manners were not nearly so easy and unaffected as were Mr. Bingley's. His brother-in-law, Mr. Hurst, was well-dressed but somewhat disinterested. And then there was Bingley's friend, Mr. Darcy. Elizabeth did not like to stare, but it was almost impossible not to stare at a gentleman so abundantly endowed with all the best parts of beauty. My cousin is correct. Mr. Darcy is so much more handsome than Mr. Bingley. His voice was so deep, so melodic and even sensuous that Elizabeth almost did not notice his haughty air. Almost. Her cousin, in her eagerness to meet the gentleman, stole Elizabeth's place in line at the last moment and offered her hand to the gentleman. His dark, brooding eyes grew even more foreboding as he reluctantly accepted it and bowed almost imperceptibly. How rude! True, her cousin's display could almost be described as vulgar, but surely the gentleman was no stranger to such a reception from an eager young girl. Not that young Phoebe was put off by Mr. Darcy's cold reception. She merely drifted away as though she had touched the hand of Adonis himself. It was then Elizabeth's turn to meet everyone. The bright smiles she bestowed upon his friend Bingley, and even the polite smiles she bestowed upon Bingley's sisters, she promptly dropped when she stood before Mr. Darcy. She dared not look into his eyes and risk seeing that same haughty stare he bestowed upon her cousin. But then he reached out his hand to her.
"Miss Elizabeth,"
he said. Against her will, she looked up. Her eyes met his. He stole her breath away. Her hand reached out to his, and for a time Elizabeth forgot what she was about. Her next recollection was of her standing alone on the outside balcony, the same hand against her chest, reminding herself to breathe. Thank you for listening to the initial chapters of Together in Perfect Felicity, written by P.O. Dixon and read by Anna, a professional human voice replica. If you enjoyed this glimpse of the story, you're going to love what's in store. Be sure to watch for the full-length edition coming soon.